Welcome to the world of daily life stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Enjoy listening. The early morning sun bathed the rolling fields of Carter Farms in hues of amber and gold. Samuel Carter stood at the edge of the property, leaning against a weathered wooden post that had stood as long as he could remember. The scent of tilled earth was sharp in the crisp air, and the rhythmic hum of tractors in the distance served as a reminder of the day ahead. But Samuel's mind was elsewhere, fixed not on the acres of farmland sprawling before him, but on an image burned into his thoughts, a sleek, silver jet cutting through the sky. For most of his 55 years, Samuel had been a farmer like his father and his father before him. He was a man who believed in the dignity of hard work and the rewards of patience. The farm was more than land and crops, it was a legacy. But Samuel had something his ancestors didn't, a vision that extended far beyond the boundaries of their modest plot. Years earlier, during a rare trip to a farming expo in Chicago, Samuel had stumbled upon a panel discussing global agricultural logistics. The speakers painted a vivid picture of a future where farm-to-market efficiency could be revolutionized with direct distribution systems. They spoke of cutting out the middleman, reducing waste, and empowering farmers. The room buzzed with ideas of using technology to reach international markets, and Samuel listened intently, his mind racing. It was in that moment the seed of a dream was planted. What if Carter Farms could not only grow the food but also control how it reached consumers? What if he could deliver his crops directly to markets in record time? To do that, he would need a game-changer, an aircraft to transport goods to far-off destinations, bypassing the labyrinth of trucks and shipping companies. But the idea of owning a jet was laughable at the time. Jets were for billionaires, not farmers with calloused hands and weathered overalls. Still, Samuel couldn't let the thought go. Each year, as his farm expanded and he reinvested every penny, the dream felt a little less absurd. He studied logistics, learned about aviation, and began saving. While others in his town bought new trucks or upgraded their homes, Samuel drove the same old pickup and lived modestly, his eyes always fixed on the horizon. The neighbors whispered about his peculiar habits. Why's Samuel stockpiling so much money? What's he up to, they wondered. Some joked that he was preparing for the apocalypse. Others speculated that he was planning to sell the farm and retire. Samuel didn't bother correcting them. He had no time for gossip. His focus was on the spreadsheets in his office, the books on aviation he borrowed from the library, and the long hours he spent calculating risks. His wife, Clara, was his greatest ally. If anyone can turn a crazy dream into reality, it's you, Sam, she'd say, her eyes sparkling with pride. She'd been his rock through droughts, floods, and financial strain, and now she stood by him as he chased a vision that others dismissed as pure folly. Do you think they'll take me seriously? Samuel asked Clara one evening as they sat on their porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. People respect results, not appearances, she replied. Show them what you're capable of, and they'll listen. With Clara's encouragement, Samuel spent years preparing. He attended auctions to understand aircraft values, met pilots to learn the ins and outs of maintenance, and consulted logistics experts. Slowly but surely, the plan took shape. Finally, the day arrived. Samuel had done the math, assembled the capital, and pinpointed the perfect model, a cargo jet capable of carrying tons of produce. The next step was to make his move. On a cool spring morning, Samuel parked his old truck at the local airport. He wore his usual attire, a wide-brimmed hat, a denim shirt, and his sturdy work boots. The outfit was practical, not strategic, but he knew it would provoke assumptions. And that was fine by him. He had no interest in impressing anyone, just in making his vision a reality. As Samuel stepped into the private hangar, he felt the weight of every doubt ever cast his way. The gleaming aircraft lining the space were intimidating, their polished exteriors a stark contrast to his dust-covered boots. But Samuel squared his shoulders, determined to stay the course. The salesman, a man named Richard Langley, spotted him from across the room. Dressed in a tailored gray suit, Richard exuded confidence, the kind of man who could close a multi-million-dollar deal before breakfast. But when his eyes landed on Samuel, they narrowed ever so slightly. He strode over with a polite smile, the kind reserved for window shoppers and dreamers. "Good morning," Richard said, extending his hand. "What brings you here today?" Samuel returned the handshake, his grip firm. "I'm here to buy a jet," he said plainly. Richard's smile tightened. He studied Samuel's weathered face, his straw hat, and his faded overalls. "A jet, you say?" "That's right," Samuel replied, undeterred. "I've been doing my research, and I know what I'm looking for." Richard nodded slowly, his expression betraying a flicker of skepticism. "Well, Mr. Carter." "Samuel Carter." "Mr. Carter, I'd be happy to show you our inventory. If you'll follow me." As Richard led Samuel deeper into the hangar, he gestured toward a lineup of planes. "We have several options, from smaller private jets to larger cargo models. May I ask what you're planning to use it for?" "Transporting produce," Samuel said. "Direct from my farm to markets across the country, maybe even overseas." Richard blinked. "Produce?" "That's right. I've crunched the numbers. A jet like this will save me time, reduce waste, and cut costs in the long run." Richard's lips twitched, as though suppressing a smile. "That's ambitious." Samuel stopped walking and turned to face him. "You think I can't do it, don't you?" Richard hesitated. "It's not that, Mr. Carter. It's just—" "You don't have to believe in me," Samuel said, his voice steady. "You just have to sell me the jet." Richard stared at him, caught off guard by the quiet conviction in Samuel's words. This wasn't a man chasing a whim. This was someone who had thought long and hard about his decision. "Well," Richard said, recovering, "let's take a closer look at what we've got." As they walked toward the aircraft, Samuel's heart raced. This was the culmination of years of effort, the first step in turning his dream into reality. And no matter what doubts lingered in Richard's mind, or anyone else's, Samuel knew one thing for certain: he was ready to prove them all wrong. The hum of nearby engines filled the hangar as Samuel and Richard continued their walk down the gleaming line of aircraft. Each jet seemed to shine brighter than the last, their reflective surfaces catching the light streaming in through the wide hangar doors. Samuel's eyes scanned the lineup, taking in the sleek designs and powerful frames, but his mind was already narrowing down the options based on his exhaustive research. Richard, meanwhile, rattled off specifications with the polished ease of a salesman who had recited the same pitch 1,000 times. "This model here," he said, gesturing to a mid-sized jet with a metallic blue finish, "is a popular choice for those looking for speed and efficiency. It's got a cruising range of over 3,000 miles, ideal for private travel or small-scale cargo transport. Fully customizable interiors, of course." Samuel nodded politely, but his attention wasn't on the blue jet. He had a different vision in mind. He paused before a larger aircraft, its frame built for function rather than luxury. It lacked the flash of the others, but Samuel recognized it immediately from his countless hours of research. The sturdy design, the ample cargo space, the reliable reputation, it was everything he needed. "This one," Samuel said, pointing to the jet. "Tell me about this one." Richard hesitated, glancing at the aircraft. "Ah, the Thunderhawk 900. It's a solid machine, designed primarily for cargo transport. Not the most glamorous choice, I'll admit, but it gets the job done. Can carry up to 20 tons of freight and has a range of about 2,500 miles. It's not exactly built for comfort, though." "I'm not looking for comfort," Samuel replied. "How's the maintenance? Fuel efficiency?" Richard's eyebrows lifted slightly. He hadn't expected such pointed questions. "Maintenance is straightforward, parts are readily available, and it's considered reliable for its class. As for fuel efficiency, it's not the most economical option, but it balances capacity and performance well." Samuel nodded, his expression thoughtful. He stepped closer to the jet, running a hand along its cold metallic surface. The weight of the moment began to settle over him. This wasn't just a purchase, It was a leap of faith, a tangible step toward a dream he had nurtured for years. Richard watched him closely, still trying to piece together the man standing before him. Samuel didn't fit the mold of the typical buyer who walked into the hangar. There was no entourage, no designer suit, no air of wealth or prestige. Just a farmer with calloused hands and a quiet determination that seemed to fill the room. "Mr. Carter," Richard began cautiously, "forgive me if I'm overstepping, but purchasing an aircraft like this isn't just about the upfront cost. There's fuel, maintenance, storage, expenses that add up quickly. Have you factored all of that into your plans?" Samuel turned to face him, meeting his gaze squarely. "I've factored everything. I know the purchase price, the operating costs, the maintenance schedule, and the licensing requirements. I've run the numbers 100 times over, and I know exactly what I'm getting into." Richard was momentarily taken aback. There was no hesitation, no defensiveness in Samuel's tone, just certainty. It was the kind of confidence that came from years of preparation and a deep belief in one's purpose. "All right," Richard said, folding his arms. "Let's talk numbers. The Thunderhawk 900 is listed at $5.5 million. That's before any additional fees or optional upgrades." Samuel didn't flinch. "I'll need to see the full breakdown of costs, but I've got the funds. How soon can we get the paperwork started?" Richard blinked. He'd expected more questions, more back and forth. "You're ready to move forward? Just like that?" "I didn't come here to waste time," Samuel replied. "I've been preparing for this day for years. I know what I want, and I'm ready to make it happen." Richard studied him for a long moment, his skepticism slowly giving way to a grudging respect. This wasn't the first time he'd encountered an unconventional buyer, but there was something different about Samuel. It wasn't just his confidence, it was the quiet conviction that seemed to radiate from him, the sense that this was about more than just a purchase. "All right, Mr. Carter," Richard said finally. "Let's get you what you need." The next few hours were a whirlwind of paperwork, inspections, and negotiations. Samuel's hands, so accustomed to gripping the steering wheel of a tractor or the handle of a plow, now signed document after document. Each signature felt like a small victory, a step closer to realizing the dream he had carried for so long. As the process unfolded, word began to spread through the hangar. Other salespeople and staff members, initially indifferent to the unassuming farmer, started to take notice. Whispers of the man in overalls buying a jet rippled through the space, and more than a few curious glances were cast in Samuel's direction. At one point, a younger salesman approached Richard while Samuel was inspecting the interior of the jet. "Is he serious?" the man asked, his tone tinged with disbelief. "A farmer buying a cargo jet? Come on, Richard, you're not actually closing this deal, are you?" Richard glanced at the younger man, his expression unreadable. "He knows exactly what he's doing," he said simply. "And he's got the means to back it up." By the time the final signature was inked and the sale was complete, Samuel felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The jet was his. The dream that had once seemed so far-fetched was now a reality, standing solid and tangible before him. Richard extended a hand, a genuine smile on his face. "Congratulations, Mr. Carter. You're officially the owner of a Thunderhawk 900. Samuel shook his hand firmly. "Thank you. And call me Samuel." As he walked back toward his truck, the keys to the jet in hand, Samuel couldn't help but glance over his shoulder one last time. The Thunderhawk gleamed in the afternoon light, a symbol of everything he had worked for. He knew the real work was just beginning, training a crew, organizing logistics, and integrating the jet into his operations, but for now, he allowed himself a moment to savor the victory. The doubts and skepticism of others no longer mattered. Samuel Carter, the farmer in the dusty truck and weathered overalls, had done what many thought impossible. And as he drove away from the hangar, his heart filled with pride and determination, he couldn't help but smile. The journey was far from over, but Samuel was ready for whatever lay ahead. After all, he had spent a lifetime turning the soil, planting seeds, and watching them grow. This was no different. The dream had taken root, and now it was time to see it flourish. The roar of the Thunderhawk 900's engines filled the early morning air as it taxied down the private airstrip Samuel had leased just outside of town. The once empty field had been transformed into a modest yet functional hub for his burgeoning operation. A small team of mechanics, loaders, and logistics staff buzzed around the plane, ensuring everything was in order for its first official flight. Samuel stood to the side, arms crossed, watching every detail unfold with a mix of pride and nervous anticipation. It had been 6 months since he walked into that hangar and purchased the jet. Those months had been a whirlwind of preparation, learning, and sheer determination. Samuel's days were consumed by training sessions, regulatory hurdles, and countless hours of planning. The logistics alone had been a monumental challenge. Establishing connections with markets, securing permits for air freight, and assembling a team capable of executing his vision required more effort than he'd initially anticipated. But Samuel was no stranger to hard work. He tackled each obstacle the same way he approached challenges on the farm, one step at a time, with a steady hand and unwavering focus. His wife Clara had been his greatest support, managing the farm operations while Samuel poured himself into the new venture. Together, they had weathered storms before, and this was just another chapter in their journey. The local community, however, remained divided. News of Samuel's jet purchase had spread like wildfire, and everyone had an opinion. Some marveled at his audacity, while others whispered that he had bitten off more than he could chew. At the diner, the post office, and even the church, Samuel's name came up in conversations, often accompanied by raised eyebrows or knowing chuckles. "Samuel Carter thinks he's some kind of aviation tycoon now," one neighbor remarked at a town meeting. "Mark my words, he'll be back to hauling crops on that old truck of his in no time," another added with a laugh. Samuel heard the whispers, but he didn't let them deter him. He'd learned long ago that proving others wrong wasn't the goal. Success was about fulfilling his vision and doing right by his family and the land that had given him so much. The day of the inaugural flight had arrived, and Samuel stood on the edge of a dream realized. The plane's first load included crates of fresh produce, corn, tomatoes, strawberries, and a variety of other crops from his farm. Each crate was carefully packed, labeled, and destined for high-end grocery stores and specialty markets in cities hundreds of miles away. For the first time, Samuel's produce would reach consumers directly, cutting out the middlemen and ensuring the freshness and quality his farm was known for. The pilot, a seasoned aviator named Jack Reynolds, approached Samuel with a clipboard in hand. Jack had been one of Samuel's first hires, a no-nonsense professional with decades of experience in cargo aviation. At first, Jack had been skeptical of the farmer's grand plans, but over time, he had come to respect Samuel's grit and determination. "Everything's ready, Sam," Jack said, handing over the clipboard. "Final weight check is complete, and the route is cleared. Weather looks good, too." Samuel took the clipboard, his calloused fingers gripping it tightly as he scanned the details. He nodded, satisfied. "Good work, Jack. Let's make this happen." Jack gave him a small smile. "You've come a long way to get here. I've flown a lot of cargo in my time, but I've never seen someone so invested in every little detail. You sure you're not planning to take up flying yourself?" Samuel chuckled. "One step at a time, Jack. For now, I'll leave the flying to you." As the engines roared to life, a small crowd began to gather near the edge of the airstrip. Most were members of Samuel's team, but a few curious townsfolk had shown up as well. Among them was a local reporter, jotting notes for what would no doubt be a colorful story in the next edition of the county paper. Samuel turned to Clara, who stood by his side, her hand resting gently on his arm. She looked up at him with a mixture of pride and concern. "You sure about this?" she asked softly, her voice barely audible over the noise. "I've never been more sure of anything," Samuel replied. "This is what we've worked for, Clara. It's time." The Thunderhawk began to roll down the runway, picking up speed as it prepared for liftoff. Samuel watched intently, his heart pounding in his chest. The massive jet, loaded with the fruits of his labor, climbed steadily into the sky, its silhouette shrinking against the expanse of blue. The crowd let out a collective cheer as the plane disappeared into the horizon. For Samuel, the moment was both exhilarating and surreal. He had spent years imagining this day, and now it was real. But as the jet faded from view, he knew this was only the beginning. The real test would be sustaining the operation, overcoming the inevitable challenges, and proving that his vision was more than just a pipe dream. The hours that followed were a blur of activity. Samuel stayed in constant communication with Jack and the logistics team, monitoring the flight's progress and ensuring every detail was executed flawlessly. When the plane touched down at its destination and the first crates of produce were unloaded, Samuel felt a wave of relief. The feedback from the receiving market was immediate and overwhelmingly positive. The produce had arrived fresher and faster than ever before, and buyers were eager for more. Back at the farm, Samuel gathered his team for a small celebration. They had achieved something remarkable, and he wanted them to know how much their hard work and dedication meant to him. "We did it," Samuel said, raising a glass of iced tea. "But this is just the start. What we've accomplished today proves that we can take Carter Farms to new heights, literally. I couldn't have done this without each and every one of you, and I'm proud to have you by my side. Here's to the future." The team cheered, their spirits buoyed by the success of the inaugural flight. For the first time in months, Samuel allowed himself to relax, if only for a moment. He and Clara sat on the porch that evening, watching the stars appear one by one in the clear night sky. "You've done something incredible, Sam," Clara said, her voice filled with admiration. "I always knew you could, but seeing it happen, it's amazing." Samuel smiled, taking her hand in his. "It's not just me, Clara. It's us. This dream was ours from the start, and I couldn't have done it without you." As the night deepened, Samuel's thoughts turned to the road ahead. He knew there would be hurdles, mechanical issues, market fluctuations, and the ever-present skepticism of those who doubted him. But he also knew he had the resilience to face whatever came his way. After all, he had spent a lifetime planting seeds, nurturing them, and watching them grow. This was no different. The Thunderhawk 900 was more than a jet, it was a symbol of what was possible when dreams were met with determination and hard work. And as Samuel gazed out at the vast expanse of farmland, he felt a deep sense of gratitude. The journey had only just begun, but he was ready for whatever lay ahead. The sky, after all, was no longer the limit. The morning sun cast long shadows over the airstrip as Samuel paced the hangar floor, his boots echoing against the concrete. It had been 3 months since the Thunderhawk 900's first flight, and Carter Farms Air Logistics was rapidly gaining momentum. The initial success of the operation had attracted new clients, small and medium-sized farmers who saw Samuel's venture as an opportunity to bypass traditional distribution systems. With each flight, the operation grew more efficient, but the challenges Samuel faced were equally formidable. The first sign of trouble came from an unexpected source, his long-standing relationships with local distributors. For years, Samuel had relied on these companies to transport his produce to market. While he had always envisioned moving beyond them, he hadn't anticipated the hostility that would arise when he actually did. "I hear you're running your own flights now," said Ted Grayson, the head of a regional distribution company, during a phone call one afternoon. His tone was cold, laced with barely concealed irritation. "That's right," Samuel replied, keeping his voice calm. "We've expanded our operations to include direct shipping." "Expanding, huh?" Ted said with a bitter laugh. "You're undercutting the entire system, Sam. You think the rest of us are just going to stand by while you take our business?" "I'm not undercutting anyone," Samuel said firmly. "I'm providing a service that's more efficient and better for the farmers. You've seen the numbers, Ted, our system reduces waste and gets fresh produce to markets faster. It's good for everyone." "Everyone except us," Ted shot back. "You're making enemies, Carter. Don't think this won't come back to bite you." The call ended abruptly, leaving Samuel staring at the receiver. He had known that disrupting the traditional supply chain would ruffle feathers, but he hadn't anticipated outright threats. Still, he wasn't about to back down. He had built his operation on the principles of fairness and efficiency, and he wasn't going to compromise those values for the sake of maintaining the status quo. As tensions with the distributors grew, Samuel faced another challenge: the logistics of scaling up. The Thunderhawk 900 was a reliable workhorse, but one jet could only handle so much cargo. Demand for Samuel's services was outpacing his capacity, and the calls from potential clients were becoming more frequent. "Sam, we've got another request from that co-op in Kentucky," said Sarah, the operations manager Samuel had hired to oversee logistics. She was a sharp, no-nonsense woman with a knack for solving problems before they became crises. "They want to ship 2 tons of produce to Chicago by next week, but our schedule is already packed." Samuel rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of the decision. Expanding the fleet was the obvious solution, but the cost was daunting. He had poured nearly every dollar he had into the Thunderhawk and the infrastructure to support it. Taking on another aircraft would mean securing additional financing, a prospect that made him uneasy. "What do you think, Sarah?" Samuel asked, valuing her input. "Can we make it work with what we've got?" Sarah hesitated. "We can try, but we're already running at full capacity. If we stretch too thin, we risk delays or mistakes, and that could damage our reputation." Samuel nodded. He knew she was right. The success of the operation depended on maintaining the trust of their clients. If he wanted to continue growing, he would need to take a calculated risk. Later that evening, Samuel sat on the porch with Clara, the soft hum of cicadas filling the air. He had spent hours poring over financial projections and researching potential aircraft, but his mind was still restless. "You've got that look again," Clara said, handing him a glass of sweet tea. "What's on your mind?" "I'm thinking about adding another plane," Samuel admitted. "The demand is there, but it's a big leap. I don't want to overextend us." Clara smiled gently. "You've never been afraid of big leaps before, Sam. Remember when we expanded the farm? Everyone said it was too much land for one family to handle, but you made it work. And when you bought that jet, people thought you were crazy. Now look where you are." "This is different," Samuel said, shaking his head. "We're not just growing crops anymore. This is a whole new world, and there's so much I don't know." "But you're learning," Clara said, placing a hand on his arm. "And you're not doing it alone. You've built a team, and they believe in you." "I believe in you." Her words gave Samuel the clarity he needed. The next morning, he called a meeting with Sarah and Jack to discuss the logistics of expanding the fleet. They worked late into the night, crunching numbers and analyzing routes. By the time they finished, Samuel felt more confident in his decision. A few weeks later, a second jet joined the fleet, a slightly smaller but equally capable aircraft that Samuel had managed to acquire through a favorable leasing agreement. With the addition, Carter Farms Air Logistics was able to double its capacity, opening up new opportunities for growth. But the challenges didn't end there. As Samuel's operation expanded, he began to encounter resistance from unexpected corners. Some of the larger distributors, threatened by his success, began lobbying local governments to impose stricter regulations on independent air freight services. Rumors circulated about potential inspections and compliance audits, and Samuel found himself spending more time dealing with bureaucracy than he ever had as a farmer. One day, a representative from the Federal Aviation Administration arrived unannounced at the airstrip. The man, dressed in a crisp uniform, introduced himself as Inspector Raymond Bell. "Mr. Carter, I'm here to conduct a compliance audit," Bell said, his tone neutral, but firm. "This is a routine inspection to ensure that your operation is meeting all federal regulations." Samuel nodded, masking his irritation. "Of course, Inspector. We've got nothing to hide." The inspection lasted 2 full days, with Bell scrutinizing every aspect of the operation, from maintenance logs to flight plans. Samuel's team worked tirelessly to provide the necessary documentation, and by the end of the process, Bell seemed impressed. "You've got a solid operation here, Mr. Carter," he said, shaking Samuel's hand. "It's clear you take safety and compliance seriously. Keep up the good work." The inspection was a relief, but it was also a reminder of the challenges Samuel faced as a disruptor in a traditional industry. Still, he refused to let the obstacles dampen his determination. As the months passed, Carter Farms Air Logistics continued to thrive. The operation became a lifeline for small farmers across the region, offering them a chance to compete on a level playing field with larger corporations. Samuel's vision was becoming a reality, and the whispers of doubt that had once surrounded him were gradually being replaced by admiration and respect. One evening, as Samuel stood at the edge of the airstrip, watching the Thunderhawk taxi into position for another flight, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The journey had been anything but easy, but he had stayed true to his values and his vision. "Ready for takeoff?" Jack called from the cockpit, giving Samuel a thumbs up. Samuel smiled and nodded. "Let's keep flying." And as the Thunderhawk soared into the twilight sky, Samuel knew that the horizon was just the beginning. The cold air whipped through the open doors of the hangar as Samuel Carter stood at the center of a bustling operation. The hum of forklifts loading crates of produce into the Thunderhawk 900 and its companion jet was almost deafening, but Samuel barely noticed. His mind was fixed on the day ahead, a day that promised to be one of the most significant in his journey. Today wasn't just about another shipment or another milestone for Carter Farms Air Logistics. Today, Samuel was meeting with a delegation of investors and agricultural leaders who had taken notice of his operation. The invitation had come weeks earlier, an unexpected yet welcome opportunity to showcase the potential of his business to a wider audience. These were people who could open doors to international markets and provide the capital needed to take his vision global. Samuel adjusted the cuffs of his shirt, a clean, pressed version of his usual denim. He had considered wearing a suit but decided against it. He wanted to present himself as he was, a farmer who had built something extraordinary with hard work and determination. Clara had smiled approvingly that morning as he left the house, her encouragement a steady presence in his life. "Show them who you are, Sam," she had said, her voice filled with pride. "That's all you need to do." The delegation arrived promptly at noon, a convoy of sleek black cars pulling up to the airstrip. Samuel greeted them warmly, shaking hands with each member as they introduced themselves. The group included business executives, agricultural experts, and even a representative from an international trade organization. They were polite but reserved, their expressions betraying a mix of curiosity and skepticism. "Welcome to Carter Farms Air Logistics," Samuel said, gesturing to the busy scene around them. "Everything you see here started as a dream. Let me show you how it's become a reality." He led them on a tour of the facility, explaining the logistics of his operation in detail. He spoke of the efficiency gains from direct air transport, the partnerships he had formed with other farmers, and the positive impact his business had on reducing food waste. As they walked, the visitors began to ask more questions, their initial skepticism giving way to genuine interest. "How do you ensure the produce stays fresh during transport?" asked one of the executives, a sharp-eyed woman in a tailored blazer. "We've invested in state-of-the-art refrigeration units for the cargo holds," Samuel replied. "It was a significant upfront cost, but it's paid off in the quality of the goods when they arrive. Our clients know they're getting the freshest produce possible." "And what about scalability?" asked another member of the group. "This is impressive, but can you replicate it on a larger scale?" Samuel nodded. "That's the goal. We're already looking into expanding our fleet and establishing additional hubs in other regions. With the right investment, we can make this model work on a national, and even international, level." The tour concluded in a conference room Samuel had hastily set up in the hangar's office. Maps and charts covered the walls, detailing flight routes, market reach, and growth projections. Samuel stood at the head of the table, feeling a rare flicker of nervousness as the delegation settled into their seats. "I won't take up too much of your time," he began, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. But I want to share with you why I believe in what we're doing here. For too long, small farmers like me have been at the mercy of systems that don't work in our favor. We grow the food, but we have little control over how it gets to market, or how much we earn for it. Carter Farms Air Logistics is changing that. He walked to one of the maps, pointing to the network of routes that had grown steadily over the past year. This isn't just about shipping produce. It's about creating a system that empowers farmers, reduces waste, and delivers quality to consumers. It's about taking control of our livelihoods and proving that innovation isn't limited to corporations with deep pockets. It can start right here, on a farm in Mississippi. The room was silent for a moment, the weight of his words sinking in. Then one of the executives leaned forward, a thoughtful expression on his face. "You've built something remarkable, Mr. Carter," he said. "But what happens when the big players catch wind of this and decide to compete? How do you protect what you've created?" Samuel met his gaze evenly. "Competition doesn't scare me," he said. "I've spent my whole life competing, with the weather, with market prices, with every challenge that comes with farming. What we have here isn't just a business, it's a community. The farmers who work with us believe in what we're doing, and so do our clients. That kind of trust can't be bought or replicated." The executive nodded slowly, and Samuel could see the wheels turning in his mind. The questions continued for nearly an hour, ranging from operational details to long-term strategy. By the time the meeting ended, Samuel felt both exhausted and invigorated. He had laid everything on the table, and now all he could do was wait. After the delegation departed, Samuel returned to the hangar floor, where the usual buzz of activity continued. Jack was overseeing the loading of the next shipment, while Sarah updated schedules on a tablet. Samuel paused to take it all in, the familiar hum of engines and the clatter of crates grounding him after the intensity of the meeting. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Samuel and Clara sat together on the porch, their hands entwined. He told her about the meeting, about the questions, and the interest he had seen in the delegation's eyes. "You think they'll invest?" Clara asked. "I don't know," Samuel admitted. "But I gave it everything I had. If they see the potential, great. If not, we'll keep going. We've made it this far, and I'm not about to stop now." Clara smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "Whatever happens, Sam, you've already done something incredible. I hope you know that." The days that followed were filled with anticipation as Samuel waited for word from the delegation. When the call finally came, it was from the sharp-eyed executive who had asked about competition. "Mr. Carter," she said, her tone warm. "After much discussion, we've decided to invest in your operation. We believe in your vision and want to help you take it to the next level." Samuel's heart leapt, but he kept his voice steady. "Thank you. You won't regret it." As he hung up the phone, a sense of gratitude and determination washed over him. The investment would provide the resources needed to expand the fleet, establish new hubs, and reach more farmers. But Samuel knew the real work was just beginning. Standing on the airstrip that evening, watching the Thunderhawk return from another successful flight, Samuel felt a deep sense of purpose. His journey had been one of perseverance, resilience, and unwavering belief in a dream that had once seemed impossible. And as the stars appeared one by one in the vast Mississippi sky, he knew that the horizon was only the beginning. The seeds he had planted were growing into something far greater than he had ever imagined.